By the final slow dance, Lily Whitaker had stopped looking toward the boys who promised they would ask her.
I can't.
One by one, they stepped back, looked away. Her wheelchair was not the reason the room felt cruel.
Do not make this a scene.
The cruelty was in how politely everyone pretended not to see her. Then Isaiah Cole, the quiet foster boy nobody had noticed all night, stepped away from the trophy case. His blazer was too big. His repaired shoes made almost no sound.
Where is he going?
And his hands trembled as he walked toward her.
May I have this dance?
A teacher tried to stop him.
Let's not turn Lily into a spectacle.
But Isaiah reached into his pocket and pulled out another faded blue card, almost identical to Lily's. The adults froze.
Naomi Cole.
The retired janitor recognized it first. On the back were 6 words written by a woman Maple Grove had erased years ago.
I know the steps.
But before that school learned why those 2 cards matched, we have to return to the morning when both children carried a promise they did not yet understand. By the time the final slow dance began inside Maple Grove Academy's gymnasium, Lily Whitaker had learned that rejection did not always sound cruel. Sometimes it sounded like boys clearing their throats. Sometimes it was a promise made loudly 2 weeks earlier, then broken quietly in front of everyone. Lily sat at the edge of the waxed basketball floor in her pale blue dress, hands resting on the silver wheels of her chair. Paper stars hung above her. The air smelled like fruit punch and old varnish. On her lap was a folded blue dance card. No names, not one. Across the room, Preston Vale stood with 3 boys from the lacrosse team. He had promised to save Lily the first slow dance. Now he would not look at her. His mother, Maren Vale, stood beside him in a cream blazer. She was not a teacher, but at Maple Grove, people treated her like one. Preston glanced toward Lily. Maren touched his elbow with 2 fingers. He turned away. Lily looked down before anyone could see her face change. A teacher asked if she was having fun. Lily nodded, but the teacher's eyes dropped to the empty card. Lily saw it. The song shifted. Couples moved onto the floor. Connor Bell took 1 step toward Lily, then stopped when his friend whispered something. Connor's face reddened. He backed away. A small laugh rose near the bleachers. Lily pressed her thumb against the folded card. That card had come from her father's seed box. On the back, in Calvin Whitaker's handwriting, were 5 words, "Seth one dance for courage." At breakfast, those words had felt like a blessing. Now they felt like a dare she was failing. Near the gym doors, Isaiah Cole stood beside the trophy case. He was 14, thin, black, and quiet, in a way adults mistook for obedience. His charcoal blazer was too wide at the shoulders. One heel of his black dress shoes had been repaired with glue. Most students forgot he was there. Isaiah preferred it that way. But he had not forgotten Lily. All evening, he watched how her smile arrived late, how her fingers tightened on the wheels, how she kept lifting her chin. He knew that kind of silence. Before his mother, Naomi Cole, died, she had taught dance in a church basement on Delmar Street. "Dance is not legs," she used to tell Isaiah. "Dance is listening." Isaiah had not danced since her funeral. 3 years, 4 months, 12 days. He counted because grief was easier when it became numbers. Then Lily almost folded the blue card in half. Almost, but she stopped. She held it flat on her lap like something inside her refused to disappear. Isaiah stepped away from the trophy case. At first, nobody noticed. Then Preston did. "Where are you going?" he called. Isaiah kept walking. Every step pulled him closer to the song his mother played on rainy Saturdays. He stopped in front of Lily. She looked up, guarded, not hopeful. Isaiah swallowed. "May I have this dance?" The conversations around them faded. Lily stared at him. "You do not have to." "I know." "Do you know how?" Aisha looked at her wheels, then back at her face. Yes. Principal Hargrove moved quickly toward them, smiling too hard. Isaiah, he said softly, why don't we let the planned rotation continue? There was no planned rotation. Everyone knew it. Maren Vale stepped closer. Mr. Hargrove is right. Let's not turn Lily into a spectacle. Lily flinched. A spectacle. As if the shame belonged to the girl who wanted one dance. Not the room that had refused her. Isaiah reached into his blaze post pocket. Maren's eyes dropped to his hand. Her perfect expression cracked. Isaiah pulled out another folded blue card. Old, faded. Almost identical to Lily's. Near the gym doors, retired janitor Elias Freeman straightened. He recognized that card. And then he recognized the boy. Isaiah unfolded it carefully. On the back in his mother's handwriting were 6 words. Do not let them disappear again. The gym felt smaller. Maren stared at the card as if it had walked out of a locked room. Isaiah looked at Lily. I know the steps, he said. And from the shadow near the trophy case, Mr. Freeman whispered the name Maple Grove had buried for 11 years. Naomi Cole. Before that gym heard Naomi Cole's name again, before Maren Vale's face lost its polish, before Isaiah stepped onto the floor with a card that should not have existed, Lily Whitaker had started that morning trying to believe in ordinary happiness. She woke before her alarm. For a moment, she forgot about the wheelchair. That was how mornings sometimes began now. A thin second of old life. Her eyes opened to pale sunlight on the ceiling, to rain tapping softly against the window, to the smell of toast from the kitchen downstairs. Then she moved. Her legs did not answer the way memory expected. The truth returned. Lily lay still and counted 3 breaths, the way her therapist had taught her. 1 for the body, 1 for the fear, 1 for the day. Her dress hung on the closet door in a dry cleaning bag. Pale blue, long sleeves. Not too childish, not too grown. Her mother had spent $47 at a consignment shop in Westbridge and pretended it had cost less. Lily knew because she had seen the receipt folded under the sugar bowl. Downstairs, Grace Whitaker was already moving too fast. Cabinets opened. A spoon clinked. The kettle whistled, then stopped suddenly. Like her mother had remembered noise could make the house feel nervous. When Lily rolled into the kitchen, Grace turned with a smile that arrived before her eyes were ready. There she is, Grace said. Big night. Lily smiled back. It is just a school dance. But both of them knew it was not. It was the first dance since the accident. The first school event where Lily would not be sitting in the back row, with adults saying she was brave in that tone that made brave sound like broken. Grace adjusted the cardigan on the chair beside Lily's plate. It might get cold in the gym. Mom, I know, I am not fussing. You are absolutely fussing. Grace laughed, then looked away too quickly. The accident had happened 9 months earlier on Route 16, near the bridge where fog gathered low over the creek. A delivery truck had crossed the center line. Lily remembered glass, rain, and her father's hand reaching back from the front seat. Calvin Whitaker died before the ambulance reached the hospital. Lily survived. People said that like it was simple. After breakfast, Grace went upstairs to find Lily's silver bracelet, the one Calvin had bought from a street vendor during a summer fair. While waiting, Lily rolled toward her mother's bedroom and noticed the cedar keepsake box beneath the bed, half visible where Grace must have pulled it out the night before. She should have left it alone. Instead, she lifted the lid. Inside were sympathy cards, old photographs, a cracked watch, Calvin's school board badge, and a folded blue dance card tied with a thin white ribbon. Lily untied it carefully. The paper was soft with age. Several names were written in ink, but one line at the bottom had been left blank. On the back, in her father's handwriting, were 5 words. Sove one dance for courage. Lily touched the sentence with her thumb. For the first time in weeks, she felt something open inside her that was not pain. "Mom?" she called. Grace appeared in the doorway and stopped. The color left her face. "Where did you find that?" "In the box." Lily looked down at it. "Was it Dad's?" Grace walked in slowly and sat on the edge of the bed. "Yes." "What was it for?" Grace took too long to answer. "It was from an old school program. Before you were born." "What kind of program?" Grace folded her hands in her lap. "Your father wanted Maple Grove to create a dance night for students who usually got left out. Foster kids, disabled students, children who never got asked." Lily looked back at the card. "Did it happen?" Grace's mouth tightened. Not the way he hoped. There was more in her mother's voice. But Lily had learned something about grief. Sometimes questions were doors, and the people you loved were too tired to open them. So she did not ask why. She asked the smaller thing. "Can I take it?" Grace hesitated, then she nodded. At 4:30 that afternoon, the rain stopped. Grace helped Lily into the blue dress and clipped her hair to one side. Lily pretended not to notice her mother wiping her eyes in the mirror. "You look beautiful," Grace said. Lily looked at the girl in the reflection. The chair was there. So was she. That mattered. On the drive to Maple Grove, Lily kept the dance card hidden in her lap beneath both hands. She imagined Preston writing his name on the empty line. She imagined one slow dance where nobody stared with pity. She imagined coming home and telling her father's photograph that she had been brave. But when Grace pulled up to the school entrance, Lily saw Maren Vale standing under the awning with a clipboard in one hand and a perfect smile on her face. Maren looked at Lily, then at the wheelchair, then at the folded blue card in Lily's lap. For one brief second, Maren stopped smiling. That's that same morning Isaiah Cole woke before the other boys at Bell House. He did not need an alarm. In foster home, sleep became lighter with time. You learned the scent of pipes knocking in old walls, the sound of someone crying into a pillow, the sound of a suitcase zipper at dawn. You learned that some people left without saying goodbye, and some adults called it placement. Isaiah lay on the bottom bunk and stared at the ceiling. Rain tapped against the narrow window. Across the room, Malik snored with one arm hanging off the mattress. A little boy named Jonah had kicked his blanket onto the floor. Someone had left a wet towel over the desk chair, and the room smelled like laundry soap, damp socks, and the cheap lemon cleaner Ruth Bell used every Friday. Isaiah slid out of bed carefully. His black dress shoes were under the bunk, already polished. The left heel still showed the thin glue line from where Ruth had repaired it the week before. "Ain't nobody looking at your shoes that close." She had told him. Isaiah had not answered. People always looked closer when they wanted a reason to laugh. He dressed in silence. White shirt, dark trousers, charcoal blazer from the donation closet. The sleeves were a little long, but he folded them neatly once. Then he opened the small metal lockbox beneath his bed. Inside was everything he owned that felt like his life. His mother's photograph, a bus ticket from Delmer Street, a broken cassette labeled Saturday Practice, and a folded blue dance card. The card had belonged to Naomi Cole. Her handwriting was on the back. "Do not let them disappear again." Isaiah read the words every year on the anniversary of her funeral, then folded the card and put it away before it could start hurting too much. But that morning, he placed it in his blazer pocket. He did not know why. Maybe because the school dance was at Maple Grove Academy. Maybe because his mother had said that name once with a voice that changed the weather in the room. Or maybe because grief sometimes pushed from behind when courage would not move on its own. Downstairs, Ruth Bell was making oatmeal in a dented pot. She was 62, strong-shouldered and tired in a way that made her kindness come out, sounding rough. She looked Isaiah over. "You going to a dance or a court hearing?" Isaiah adjusted his cuffs. "School formal." Same difference. For rich folks. He almost smiled. Ruth poured oatmeal into a bowl and set it down. "Eat. I'm not hungry." You are 14. That means you are either hungry or lying. Isaiah sat. For a while, the kitchen was only spoon sounds and rain. Then Ruth noticed the edge of blue paper in his pocket. Her face changed. Where'd you get that? Isaiah's hand covered the pocket. It was Mama's. I know whose it was. That made him look up. Ruth turned back to the stove, but her shoulders had gone stiff. You knew about it? I knew your mama kept things. Ruth lowered the flame. Things that made people uncomfortable. What happened at Maple Grove? Ruth did not answer quickly. Outside, a car passed through a puddle. Water hissed against the curb. Finally, she said, Your mama tried to build something there, something good. What? A dance program. For children, people liked to place near the wall and call included. Isaiah's throat tightened. Naomi Cole had taught him turns before multiplication tables. She taught him rhythm before he knew how to spell the word. But after she died, adults spoke about her like she had only been sick, never powerful, never chosen, never wronged. Why did she stop? Isaiah asked. Ruth wiped the counter even though it was already clean. Some rooms only want you if you stay grateful. Isaiah understood enough to stop asking. At school, he stayed invisible through math, lunch, and the long afternoon announcements. Maple Grove students floated around him in clean sneakers and expensive cologne, talking about dresses, pictures, rides, and who would ask whom. Isaiah kept one hand near his pocket. At 3:15, Preston Vale bumped his shoulder in the hallway. Nice blazer, Preston said. Donation bin had a formal section. Two boys laughed. Isaiah stepped aside. Preston looked disappointed. Bullies liked a reaction. Silence made them work harder. You going to dance with somebody tonight? One boy asked. Isaiah kept walking. Behind him, Preston called, Careful. The floor is slippery when you don't belong. Isaiah stopped for half a second, not because of Preston, because the words landed too close to an old memory. His mother in a school hallway, a closed office door, her voice saying, I am not asking for charity. I am asking you to honor what you promised. Then a woman's voice, smooth and cold, answering, Naomi, you are making this difficult. Isaiah did not remember the woman's face, but he remembered the tone. That evening, Ruth drove him to Maple Grove in her old brown sedan. The heater clicked loudly even though it was not cold. Before Isaiah got out, Ruth caught his sleeve. Listen to me, she said. You do not have to prove anything to people who already decided not to see you. Isaiah looked at the school entrance. Students were laughing under the lights. Parents were taking pictures. Maren Vale stood beneath the awning with a clipboard. Isaiah touched the blue card in his pocket. What if I'm not proving it to them? Ruth's hand softened. For a second, she looked like she might tell him everything. Instead, she said, Then be careful with your heart. Inside the gym, Isaiah went straight to the trophy case and stayed there. He watched. He listened. He waited without knowing what he was waiting for. Then Lily Whitaker rolled in wearing a pale blue dress, holding a folded card that looked exactly like his mother's. And Maren Vale saw it too. Vale saw both blue cards before anyone else understood what they meant. Lily's card rested on her lap when Grace rolled her through the gym doors. Isaiah's card was hidden in his blazer pocket near the trophy case. But Maren had trained herself to notice small threats early. That was how she survived Maple Grove. Nothing at the school happened by accident. Not the flowers on the tables, not the donor names printed on the program, not which parents stood near the principal when photographs were taken. Maren believed order was mercy. Mess embarrassed people. Pain embarrassed people. Children who needed too much help embarrassed people. And embarrassment in Maren's world was something to be corrected before it spread. So when Lily entered the gym in her pale blue dress, Maren crossed the floor with her clipboard held against her chest. Lily, she said warmly, you look lovely. Thank you, Lily answered. Grace stood behind the wheelchair, one hand on the handle. She picked the dress herself. How wonderful! Maren's smile stayed fixed. We saved a nice space near the refreshment table. Easy access, less crowding. Lily glanced toward the dance floor. I thought students were sitting by grade. They are, Maren said. Mostly. But we wanted you comfortable. Comfortable. It was one of those words adults used when they meant separate. Grace's hand tightened slightly on the wheelchair handle, but Lily answered first. I would rather sit with my class. For half a second, Maren's smile thinned. Of course. Across the gym, Preston watched from beside the bleachers. His friends were already joking about who would dance with whom. Connor Bell kept saying he would ask 3 girls before dessert. Another boy had drawn fake hearts on his wrist in marker. Preston was trying to laugh with them, but his eyes kept moving back to Lily. He remembered his promise. He also remembered what his mother had said in the car. You were kind to offer, Maren had told him while turning into the school parking lot. But kindness does not mean making yourself uncomfortable in front of everyone. I said I'd dance with her. You said something polite. She heard me. Maren had looked at him then. Not angry, just disappointed. That was worse. Preston, people are watching you this year. Your teachers, the lacrosse coach, Mr. Hargrove. Donors notice which boys carry themselves with confidence. It's one dance. It is never one dance when people are waiting to laugh. Now inside the gym, Preston felt those words sitting in his throat. Lily had been placed at the edge of the dance floor, not quite included, not quite excluded. Grace stood nearby, pretending to check her phone. Principal Hargrove walked past twice and said nothing. Then Isaiah entered, no parent beside him, no group around him. Just a thin black boy in a donated blazer, moving quietly toward the trophy case like he was trying to take up less space than his own shadow. Preston's friend Tyler leaned close. Is that the Foster kid? Preston shrugged. I guess. He looks like he came to serve punch. The boys laughed. Preston laughed too, but not fully. Isaiah heard them. His face did not change. That bothered Preston more than anger would have. Near the refreshment table, Maren noticed Isaiah and turned to Principal Hargrove. I thought Bell House children were attending with chaperones. They are, Hargrove said. Mrs. Bell signed him in. Maren tapped her pen against the clipboard. We should be mindful tonight. The donors want the evening to feel uplifting. Hargrove knew what that meant. He had spent years translating Maren's gentle sentences into instructions. I'll keep an eye on things, he said. Please do. The first fast songs passed without trouble. Students moved in groups. Lily smiled when girls from her English class came over and complimented her dress. For a while, it almost worked. Then the first slow song began. The gym changed. Pairs mattered now. Names mattered. Courage mattered. Lily opened the blue card on her lap. Preston saw it. His stomach tightened. Connor Bell walked past Lily, slowed, then looked toward Preston's group. Tyler shook his head and smirked. Connor kept walking. One refusal created permission for the next. That was how cruelty often worked. Most people did not lead it. They simply waited until someone else made it safe. Maren stood beside the punch table, watching her son. Preston took one step toward Lily. Maren's eyes found him immediately. She did not shake her head. She did not speak. She only touched 2 fingers to her elbow, the same gesture she used when correcting his posture at church, at donor dinners, at school award nights. Preston stopped. Lily saw him stop. That was the moment her face changed, not dramatically, not enough for the room to gasp. Only a small fading in her eyes, like a porch light switching off behind curtains. Isaiah saw it from the trophy case. So did Elias Freeman, standing near the folded chairs with his old storage key in his pocket. Freeman had worked at Maple Grove for 32 years. He knew which closets held broken decorations, which trophies had misspelled names, and which stories the school preferred to keep under dust. When he saw Lily's blue card, his breath caught. When he saw Maren watching it, his hand closed around the key. Then Maren leaned toward Preston as he passed her. "Do not be the boy who turns this dance into a scene," she whispered. Preston looked at Lily, then at Zaya, then at the floor, and beside the trophy case, Isaiah finally understood that nobody was coming. Isaiah had spent most of his life learning when not to move. Do not move when adults are angry. Do not move when boys want a reaction. Do not move when someone says your name like they already regret knowing it. But watching Lily Whitaker hold that blue dance card while the room stepped around her did something Isaiah could not count away. He left the trophy case. His shoes crossed the gym floor with quiet, careful steps, not fast enough to look dramatic, not slow enough to turn back. Preston saw him first. "Where are you going?" he called. Isaiah kept walking. Tyler laughed under his breath. "No way!" A few students turned, then more. By the time Isaiah reached Lily, the music had softened into the part of the song where couples usually stopped joking and started pretending not to feel nervous. Lily looked up. Her face had already prepared for another disappointment. Isaiah hated that. Not with loud anger. With the heavy kind that sat behind the ribs. He stopped an arm's length from her chair. "May I have this dance?" Lily blinked once. "You do not have to," she said. "I know." Her fingers touched the card on her lap. People are staring. They already were. That almost made her smile. Almost. "Do you know how?" she asked. Isaiah looked at the position of her wheels, the height of the footplate, the way her hands rested near the rims. "Yes." Behind him, Preston stepped forward. "Man,
Don't make this weird.
Isaiah did not turn around. Lily did. For the first time all night, her voice sharpened. "What part is weird, Preston?" The question hit him harder than an insult. Preston's mouth opened, but no answer came. Maren Vale moved quickly then, her heels clicking across the floor. Principal Hargrove followed, as if pulled by the same string. "Isaiah," Hargrove said, keeping his voice low, "this is not the best moment." Isaiah turned slightly. "For who?" The principal's smile froze. Maren placed herself beside him, close enough to control the conversation, but not close enough to look cruel. "Lily has had a long evening," Maren said. "We do not want to put pressure on her." Lily stared at her. "I said yes," Lily whispered. Maren's eyes flicked down. "You have not said yes, sweetheart." Something changed in Lily's face. The room was watching her be corrected about her own choice. That was when Isaiah reached into his blazer pocket and pulled out his folded blue card. Maren stopped breathing for one visible second. It was Smalls, but Isaiah saw it. So did Elias Freeman. So did Grace Whitaker, standing near the wall with her hand at her throat. Isaiah unfolded the card. The paper had been opened so many times the crease looked almost white. On the back, Naomi Cole's handwriting, curved across the blue surface, "Do not let them disappear again." Maren's polished calm slipped. "Where did you get that?" she asked. Isaiah held the card closer to his chest. "It was my mother's." The word mother moved through him like a bruise being touched. Principal Hargrove looked at Maren. "Do you know something about this?" Maren recovered quickly. People like her often did. "This is not appropriate," she said. "Old personal items should not be brought into a school event to create confusion." Elias Freeman stepped out from beside the folded chairs. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "That is not just an old personal item." Maren turned toward him. "Mr. Freeman, this is a student matter." "No," Freeman said. "It became an adult matter 11 years ago." The gym shifted. Students looked from Maren to Isaiah, then to Lily. Parents stopped pretending to check phones. Grace moved closer to her daughter. Isaiah's hand tightened around the card. He had not meant to expose anything. He had only meant to ask for one dance. But now the air felt full of locked doors opening. Freeman looked at Isaiah with an expression that almost hurt. "You are Naomi's boy." Isasia nodded once. Maren's face hardened at the name. Preston's noticed, for the first time, he looked afraid of his mother instead of for her. Lily looked at Isaiah's card, then at her own. "They match," she said, Grace whispered. "Lily." But Lily had already unfolded her father's card, save one dance for courage. The two blue cards faced each other across the space between them like two halves of a conversation interrupted years ago. Isaiah stared at Lily's card. "My mother wrote something like that," he said. Lily's voice softened. "My father did." Maren stepped in. "Enough. This is not the place." Isaiah looked at her then. For years, he had carried questions with no names. Why did his mother cry after certain phone calls? Why did she stop teaching at buildings with polished floors? Why did she tell him never to beg for a room that should have opened its own door? Now Maren Vale was standing in front of him, and every old question seemed to recognize her. "I know the steps," Isaiah said, Maren's lips pressed together. "That is not the point. It is to her." He turned back to Lily. This time, he did not ask the room. He asked only her. "Do you want to dance?" Lily looked at her mother. Grace's eyes were wet, but she did not shake her head. Then Lily looked at the students who had stepped back, the boys who had laughed, the adults who had softened cruelty with careful words. Finally, she looked at Isaiah. "Yes," she said. Isaiah placed his card in his pocket and offered his hands, palms open. Exactly as Naomi Cole had taught him, Lily placed her hands over his. For one breath, the room did not know what to do with children who had stopped asking permission. Then the music reached its chorus. Isaiah stepped backward. Lily rolled forward. And Maren Vale looked toward Elias Freeman because she knew the dance was not the only thing about to return. The dance began with a mistake almost no one else noticed. Isaiah's left hand trembled. Not much. Just enough for Lily to feel it through with her fingers. She looked up at him, not with pity, but with attention. "You are scared too," she whispered. Isaiah kept his eyes on the floor line in front of her wheels. Yes, that answer did something for Lily. It made the moment less like being rescued and more like being trusted. Isaiah stepped back again, slowly. Lily followed the pressure of his hands. He did not pull her chair. He did not push too hard. He gave her space to move, then waited for her to meet him in the rhythm. Naomi Cole had taught him that, never drag someone into trait, I light them. Around them, the gym held its breath. The boys near the bleachers stopped laughing. Parents lowered their phones. Preston stood frozen, his face burning as he watched Isaiah do the one thing he had been too afraid to do. Lily turned her wheels once. Then again, Isaiah shifted to the side, guiding the shape without controlling it. The motion was small at first, almost private. A half circle, a pause, a slow return. But then Lily understood. Her shoulders loosened, her chin lifted. For the first time that night, her smile arrived on time. Grace Whitaker covered her mouth with one hand. Maren Vale saw the room changing and hated how quickly beauty could become evidence. She turned toward Principal Hargrove. "Stop this before it becomes inappropriate." Hargrove looked uncertain. "They are only dancing." Maren's eyes sharpened. "You know what I mean." But he did not move. Maybe it was cowardice. Maybe it was shame. Or maybe for once, he could not find a polite enough lie to interrupt two children doing nothing wrong. Near the folded chairs, Elias Freeman stepped toward Grace. "There is something you should see," he said. Grace looked at him through tears. "What?" Freeman pulled an old brass key from his pocket. "Storage room C. Grace went still. Calvin had mentioned that room once, years ago, after a school board meeting. He had come home quiet, hung his coat by the back door, and said, 'Some promises do not die. People just lock them away.' At the time, Grace thought grief had already started speaking through him. Now she was not sure. Freeman looked toward the dance floor. Your husband left a box there, so did Naomi's. Grace's eyes moved to Isaiah. Naomi Cole? Freeman nodded. She was the best instructor this school never admitted it had. Maren heard enough to turn. Mr. Freeman, she said louder now. You have no authority to remove school property. Freeman did not raise his voice. I am not removing it. I am returning it. The music continued, but the room had split into 2 stories. In one, Isaiah and Lily moved in a slow circle beneath paper stars. In the other, an old man walked toward a locked hallway, with Grace beside him and Maren following. In anger she could no longer hide. Ruth Bell, who had been standing near the entrance with her arms folded, saw Freeman take the key out fully. Her face changed. She knew that key. Years earlier, Naomi had come home from Maple Grove with red eyes and a cardboard box she refused to open. Ruth had asked what happened. Naomi had only said, "They love the idea of children being included until inclusion asks them to give up control." That night, Naomi had placed 1 blue dance card in Isaiah's baby book and 1 cassette tape in Ruth's hands. "If anything happens to me," Naomi had said, "make sure my boy knows I was not ashamed." Ruth had kept the tape, but she had never played it for him. Not because she wanted to hide the truth, because truth, in the hands of a child with nowhere safe to put it, could become another wound. Freeman unlocked storage room C. The door groaned open. The air smelled of dust, cardboard, old paper, and forgotten decorations. Plastic pumpkins was leaned against Christmas wreaths. Broken stage lights sat beneath faded banners. In the corner behind stacked folding tables was a gray file box with blue tape across the lid. Grace read the handwriting on the tape. Inclusive Dance Initiative. Under it were 2 names. Calvin Whitaker, Naomi Cole. Grace's knees weakened, and Ruth caught her elbow before she fell. Maren stood in the doorway, pale with fury. "That box was archived," she said. Freeman looked at her. "No, it was hidden." He lifted the lid. Inside were lesson plans, signed donor pledges, board minutes, photographs, medical accommodation forms, and a letter from Calvin naming Naomi as program director. The Grace picked up the letter with shaking hands. Her husband's words filled the page. "This program is not charity. It is access. It is dignity. If Maple Grove teaches children to stand tall, then it must also teach them that standing is not the only way to be whole." Grace pressed the paper to her chest. In the gym, Sasong neared its final phase. Isaiah guided Lily through a careful turn. Her chair glided across the polished floor, blue dress catching the light, face open and astonished. Then Isaiah looked toward the hallway and saw Ruth holding the file box. He missed 1 step. His shoe slipped. The gym gasped. For 1 second, every old fear returned to his face. The polished floor, the watching adults, the name Naomi Cole hanging in the air like a door about to open. Lily tightened her hands over his. "Do not disappear," she whispered. Isaiah looked at her, then at the blue card in his pocket. And behind Ruth, Maren Vale reached for the box. Maren Vale moved fast for someone who had spent the whole evening pretending nothing could touch her. Her hand reached for the gray file box. Ruth Bell stepped in front of it. "No, Mom." Maren looked at her as if Ruth had forgotten her place. "This is school property." Ruth's voice stayed low. "Then the school should have taken better care of it." In the gym, Isaiah saw only pieces, Ruth's body blocking the doorway, Grace holding a letter against her chest, Freeman standing still as stone. Maren's hand hovering over the box like she could erase 11 years by closing a lid. The old panic rose through Isaiah's legs. He was back in a hallway he barely remembered, his mother's hand around his, her voice steady but her fingers cold. Adults behind a closed door saying words like concern, disruption, donor confidence. Then Naomi kneeling in front of him outside the school office. "Isaiah, she had whispered, when people make you feel small, do not become small for them." He had been too young to understand. Now he was old enough to feel the cost. His shoe slipped again. This time, Lily felt his weight shift. She tightened her grip. Isaiah. The music continued around them, but the dance was no longer about steps. It was about whether a boy who had hidden from every room could stay visible long enough to finish what his mother started. "I can't," he whispered. Lily looked at him with the kind of honesty that does not soften the truth. "Yes, you can, but not alone." Those words reached him differently. Not alone. His mother had taught him that partner dance was never one body showing off. It was two people telling the truth at the same time. Isaiah breathed in, one for the body, one for the fear, one for the promise. Then he adjusted his hands, not pulling Lily forward, only offering direction. Lily rolled with him. The chair turned slowly, smoothly, her blue dress moving like water under the gym lights. A murmur passed through the students, not laughter, wonder. Preston Vale watched with his hands hanging uselessly at his sides. Shame moved across his face in stages. First embarrassment, then recognition, then something worse. He understood that he had not refused Lily because he did not know how to dance with her. He refused because he cared more about being watched than about being decent. That truth made him look smaller than any joke could have. Isaiah guided Lily into a wider turn. Her wheels whispered over the polished floor. She followed the rhythm, then added her own small motion, a gentle spin of the right wheel that surprised even Isaiah. He smiled. It was quick, almost private, but Lily and smiled back. At the hallway entrance, Maren saw the same smile and knew she was losing the room. She raised her voice. "This is emotional manipulation," she said. "Children are being used to reopen something that was settled years ago." Grace turned toward her. "My husband's letter says otherwise." Maren's face tightened. "Your husband was grieving when he wrote many things." The sentence struck Grace so hard she went silent. Ruth took one step forward. Careful. Maren looked at her. "Excuse me?" Ruth's eyes did not move. "I said careful." Freeman reached into the file box and pulled out a small cassette tape in a cracked plastic case. Ruth saw it and closed her eyes. Isaiah saw the tape from across the room. He knew the label, Saturday Practice. His breath caught. For 3 years, he had thought that tape was gone. He had searched the lockbox, his old bags, the drawers Ruth told him not to open. He had wanted to hear his mother's voice so badly some nights that he forgot what sleep was supposed to feel like. Ruth looked at him from the hallway. Her face was full of apology. Isaiah did not understand everything yet. But he understood enough. Maren saw the tape too. For the first time, fear did not merely crack her expression. It stood plainly inside it. "Do not play that," she said. No one moved. Then Preston, of all people, stepped away from the boys near the bleachers. His voice shook. "Why?" Maren turned. "Preston," he swallowed. "Why can't they play it?" The question landed in the room with more force than accusation, because it came from her son, because he was no longer whispering, because everyone had heard. Isaiah looked at Lily. The song was ending. One final measure remained. He could stop now. He could let the adults fight over papers and tapes and old guilt. He could return to the trophy case and become invisible again. But Lily's hands were still over his, and the blue card was still in his pocket. Isaiah stepped into the final turn. Lily followed. Together they moved through the center of the floor, not perfectly, not like a performance rehearsed for applause, but like two children choosing not to be erased. When the last note faded, Lily's chair came to rest facing Isaiah. For 1 second, no one clapped. The silence was too full. Then Elias Freeman lifted the cassette tape. His voice broke as he spoke. "Before anybody decides what this school wants remembered, you should hear what Naomi Cole said the night they pushed her out." Isaiah's eyes filled. Maren whispered, "Please." And that single word told the whole room the tape was real. No one moved toward the cassette player at first. It sat on a narrow table near the refreshment bowls. An old black machine teachers had used earlier for dance announcements when the sound system kept cutting out. Its plastic buttons were worn white at the edges. A strip of tape held the battery cover shut. Elias Freeman carried the cassette like it was fragile enough to break the room. Isaiah stood beside Lily in the middle of the gym, both of them still breathing from the dance. Her hands rested on her wheels. His hands hung at his sides, fingers trembling. Ruth Bell watched him, shame and love pulling at her face. "I should have played it for you," she said quietly. Isaiah did not answer. He was looking at the tape, Saturday practice, his mother's handwriting, his mother's voice, maybe. The thing grief wanted most and feared most at the same time. Maren Vale stepped between Freeman and the table. "This has gone far enough," she said. Her voice was still polished, but the polish had scratches now. Grace Whitaker unfolded Calvin's letter. "My husband helped create this program," she said. "My daughter has a right to know why it vanished." Maren turned to the parents. "This is exactly why private matters should not be dragged into student events." Freeman looked at her. "Private?" he asked. "You held a vote without the full board present. You removed Naomi Cole's name from the proposal. You told donors the program was postponed because of budget issues. Then you locked the files away." Principal Hargrove stared at her. "Maren?" She did not look at him. Preston did. For the first time that night, Preston saw his mother not as the person who knew what to do, but as someone who had spent years teaching him how to hide from what was right. Freeman placed the cassette into the player. Maren whispered again, "Please." But nobody obeyed her. The button clicked. For 2 seconds, there was only tape hiss. Then Naomi Cole's voice filled the gym. It was softer than Isaiah remembered, and stronger than he could bear. "This is Naomi Cole," the recording began. "Community dance instructor, Delmar Street Arts Center. If this tape is ever played, it means someone tried to bury the program Calvin Whitaker and I built." Asias covered his mouth. Lily looked up at him, tears already gathering. Naomi continued. "This initiative was never about making children look inspirational for donors. It was about teaching every child in this school that dignity is not reserved for bodies that move a certain way, families with a certain name, or children who arrive with the right last address." The room listened, not politely, honestly. That was different. On the tape, Naomi paused. There was a faint sound of paper moving. Calvin believed Maple Grove could be better than its image. I did too. But today I was told my presence made some families uncomfortable. I was told foster children brought complications. I was told disabled students required sensitivity, not visibility. Grace shut her eyes. Lily's face changed at the word visibility. For months, people had tried to protect her by placing her near walls, near exits, near adults, near anything except the center. Naomi's voice shook, but it did not break. "I am leaving copies of the signed pledges, lesson plans, and board notes with Mr. Freeman because he is the only person in this building who looked ashamed while others looked practical. If my son ever hears this, Isaiah baby, I want you to know something." Isaiah stopped breathing. "You were never too quiet. You were listening. Keep listening. But when the time comes, do not let them disappear again. Not you. Not any child they try to place at the edge of the room." The tape clicked softly as the recording ended. Nobody spoke. Then Lily lifted her blue dance card. "My father wrote, 'Save one dance for courage.'" She looked at Maren. "Was he writing about this?" Maren's lips parted, but no answer came. Grace stepped forward with the letter. "Yes," she said, voice shaking. "He was." Lily's fingers tightened around the card. "Then why did nobody tell me?" That question hurt more than anger, because it did not only accuse Maren, it reached every adult who had chosen comfort over truth. Principal Hargrove lowered his eyes. Freeman wiped his cheek. Ruth stood beside Isaiah but did not touch him yet. She seemed to know he had to decide whether to let anyone near. Preston stepped forward slowly. His face was red, but he did not look away this time. "Lily," he said, "I'm sorry." Lily looked at him. He swallowed. "I was scared people would laugh." She waited. Preston looked toward Isaiah, then back at her. "And I let them laugh at you instead." For once, Maren did not correct him. The apology did not fix the evening. Real apologies rarely arrive with enough power to undo the wound. But sometimes they mark the first honest place where healing can begin. Maren stood alone beside the punch table. Surrounded by every careful choice she had made, Grace faced her. "You buried my husband's promise." Maren's voice was thin. "I was trying to protect the school." Freeman answered, "No, you were protecting the version of the school that made certain children easier to ignore." That sentence stayed in the air. Isaiah took the blue card from his pocket and looked at his mother's words again. "Do not let them disappear again." Then Lily held out her card. There was one empty line at the bottom. "Do you have a pen?" she asked. Grace found one in her purse with shaking hands. Lily wrote slowly, "Isaiah Cole. Not as a rescue, not as charity, as a partner." Then she looked at the room that had refused her and said, "Now you can remember us correctly." 3 days after the dance, Maple Grove Academy held an emergency assembly. This time, Lily Whitaker was not placed near the wall. She sat in the front row beside her mother, wearing a gray sweater and the same silver hair clip from the formal. The blue dance card rested in her lap inside a clear folder, protected now, not hidden. Isaiah Cole sat 2 seats away with Ruth Bell beside him. He had not wanted to come. The night of the dance had followed him home like weather. He lay awake hearing his mother's voice from the cassette, hearing the tape hiss before she said his name, hearing Lily whisper, "Do not disappear." By morning, Ruth had placed the cassette on the kitchen table. "I was wrong to keep it from you," she said. Isaiah stared at it. Ruth's hands were folded around a mug of coffee, gone cold. "I thought I was protecting you from pain." He looked at her then. "You were protecting yourself from watching me feel it." Ruth closed her eyes. It was not cruel. That was why it hurt. Finally, she nodded. Yes, for the first time since he arrived at Bell House, Isaiah believed her apology. At the assembly, Principal Hargrove stood behind the podium, with papers trembling in his hands. Behind him were board members, teachers, and Maren Vale. Maren looked smaller without a clipboard. Her cream blazer was gone. She wore a dark coat and kept her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Preston stood near the aisle, separate from his friends. Hargrove cleared his throat. Maple Grove Academy failed to honor a program created by Calvin Whitaker and Naomi Cole. Records confirm that donor pledges, accommodation plans, and board support were improperly withheld from public review. The words were formal, but everyone understood them. They had hidden it. They had buried names. They had called exclusion order. Grace reached for Lily's hand. Hargrove continued. Effective immediately, the school will restore the Inclusive Dance Initiative as an annual program. It will include students with disabilities, foster youth, and any student who has ever been made to feel that participation must be earned by being convenient. Lily looked down at her father's card. Isaiah looked at the floor. Then Hargrove said the part that made him look up. The scholarship and program will be named the Whitaker-Cole Promise. Ruth's breath caught. Isaiah did not cry. Not then. Grief had strange timing. Sometimes it waited until the room emptied. Maren stepped to the microphone next. A few parents shifted uncomfortably. For a moment, she looked at the audience the way she always had, searching for control. Then she saw Preston. Her son was not smiling. He was not helping her escape. He was simply watching, waiting to see whether she would finally tell the truth. Maren gripped the podium. "I told myself I was protecting this school," she said. But I protected an image. I used polite words to make children feel like their presence was a problem. I owe Lily Whitaker an apology. I owe Isaiah Cole an apology. And I owe Naomi Cole's memory more than I can repay. Her voice shook on Naomi's name. No one clapped. That was good. Some moments did not need applause. They needed to be heard without decoration. After the assembly, Preston walked to Lily. He stopped far enough away to give her room. I know sorry is not enough, he said. Lily studied him. No, she answered. It is not, he nodded. Then she added, but it is a start if you mean it tomorrow too. Preston looked down, ashamed but listening. I will try. Lily held his gaze. Do better than try when people are watching. Across the lobby, Isaiah stood near the trophy case, the same place where he had tried to disappear 3 nights earlier. Freeman came up beside him, carrying a small frame wrapped in brown paper. I thought you should see it first, the old man said. Inside the frame were 2 blue dance cards, Calvin's, Naomi's. Between them was a small brass plate. Save one dance for courage. Isaiah touched the glass with 1 finger. For years, his mother had lived in fragments. A photograph, a tape, a few sentences adults were too careful with. Now her name would hang in the hallway of a school that once tried to make her temporary. Lily rolled beside him. She held up her own card. At the bottom, beneath Isaiah Cole, she had written another line, Naomi Cole and Calvin Whitaker. I thought they should get their dance too, she said. Isaiah looked at her. This time he smiled without hiding it. Weeks later, when the first inclusive dance class opened, only 12 students came, then 20, then 35. Some arrived in wheelchairs. Some came from foster homes. Some came because they were lonely. Some came because they had laughed that night and could not forget the sound of their own cowardice. Isaiah did not teach like someone trying to impress people. He taught like someone listening. He showed them how to ask before touching a chair, how to wait for consent, how to follow rhythm without assuming everyone heard it the same way, how to understand that dignity was not something you gave another person. It was something you recognized. Lily became the first student to sign every new dance card. Not because everyone wanted to dance with her now, but because she knew what an empty line could do to a heart. And every year at the spring formal, 1 blue card was left on the center table. A reminder, not of shame, not of pity, but of the night a quiet orphan walked across a gym floor, asked this girl a simple question, an entire school to remember what courage looked like. If this story reminded you of someone who stood beside you when others stepped away, write their name in the comments. Like this story if it moved you, and subscribe to Hush Stories about silence, dignity, and the kind of courage the world almost misses.